when they're 40 and they realize like it's not cool to be an influencer anymore. What do you have to show for it?
Do you actually know how to take care of trees yet? Or has this all just been performance?
Yeah. I think today we should talk about the role that social media plays in arboriculture. And I think it's kind of weird to think that social media can play a role in something like this. But for anyone that's in arboriculture or involved in any way, it actually plays like a pretty large role in it. And I think it's something that I don't know if I've ever really heard talked about. So I thought it was kind of an interesting topic for us to sort of think about out loud.
Yeah, and while I'm not in many spaces online, I imagine most industries have some equivalent thing where there's like nurse TikTok. And like, I'm sure that other industries have similar things.
Yeah, so I think it's important for us to talk not only about what our personal experience has been with social media and its role in arboriculture, but also from an industry standpoint, how it's, what its impacts ultimately are on the industry as a whole.
Well, so there was a brief moment in time where I wanted to be an Instagram arborist.
Oh yeah, you had it all. You had like the pit vipers. You had the really colorful chainsaw pants. I mean, you were cool, man.
Yeah,
cool.
maybe. Yeah. So now that account's not around anymore. But yeah, when I was first getting in and everything was really exciting and new, it was sort of like uncovering this whole new space that people were interacting in. And to me, at a superficial level, it seemed like, oh, like we're all like cool with each other. We're all trying to help each other out. Sharing climbing techniques, all of this was pretty cool to an intro level participant in that space.
Yeah.
My opinion has changed as I've spent more time in that virtual space. But at the start, I was really thrilled that it existed at all.
Yeah, because I mean, for me personally, I never would have found out about tree climbing or arboriculture if it wasn't for social media. A lot of people probably don't know, but I started in forestry, and it wasn't until I stumbled across a YouTube video of someone showing how to climb a tree using like ropes and harnesses and the gear. I was like, oh my God, like this is so cool. I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I love trees. I love climbing. Like, yeah, this is it. So I wouldn't have like discovered arboriculture without social media. And that sort of the tendency for social media to kind of glamorize that side of it, I mean, kind of got me into it. It hooked me. I was like, this stuff is badass. Like, I want to do that.
And that's also something that we should talk about in a different section. But a very important part of the discussion is that glamorization of that element of the work.
Big time.
And what we're referring to, I guess, is just the GoPro footage of people killing trees.
Yeah.
And I don't deny that that's exciting, and of course it is. But it can misrepresent what arboriculture is actually meant to be about.
And I think seeing all of the social media, videos and pictures of people doing something cool was kind of a motivator for me to like get better at that, because I was really intrigued at climbing like from the beginning. And, it was sort of acted for me as a motivator to get good so I could, be like those guys that I was watching. And so I think for me, that was a kind of a pro. It
was motivating.
Yeah, it was motivating for me. And, getting to see people that are really talented and put in the work to, perform this high-skilled, high-risk job was it was so cool. More recently, I've been able to develop and foster like new relationships and connect with people that feel similarly to the way that you and I do.
Mhm.
And it's now provided me a sense of hope that the industry is moving in a progressive way and that people are thinking similar to us, and that there's got to be something that we can do to be better as arborists besides just, glorifying tree killing.
And I think sharing those techniques on how to safely do those things is important, but there's a huge chunk of how to actually take care of trees that's missing from the social media landscape, and partly because it's simply not as photogenic or it doesn't look as good on video.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and I think not enough people are getting exposed to these kinds of things in social media. And in my own experience, it's been challenging to distill and simplify those nuances in short form Instagram, TikTok content. That's why I prefer to write, and making these longer videos where it allows us to actually expand on more detailed things. But this is sort of a challenge with today's fast-paced, quick form content. Mm-hmm. There's not a whole lot of in-depth nuance that can be conveyed in 60 seconds or less.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And that's been a challenge of mine, and this is partly why I stopped wanting to be an Instagram arborist, is because the things I wanted to say and talk about, the questions I wanted to ask, I can't do that on these regular social media platforms.
Yeah, it's not going to gain as much traction if you're asking what soil humectants are you using in your soil improvement zones. That's not going to.
It's not the place for that.
Yeah.
But those are the things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, not being able to find that sort of sense of community on, let's just use Instagram for an example. I've sort of left the platform. I use the Tree First Instagram account to share some posts, but I'm not really engaged all that much with it.
Sure.
And that's just because what I'm looking for isn't there. And I think our efforts in creating content like this, or long form content, like the articles or videos or the book even, is all trying to sort of push people in that direction as well. Hey, let's stop just thinking killing trees is cool, and sure, it's fun and exciting, but we have to have some meaning in our work, and we have to talk about these things. And for me, Instagram's just not the place where anything like that can be accomplished.
I think you're right, but I also think that social media can, or has the potential rather, to help the industry progress more rapidly. Not just through the sharing of different climbing techniques, safe working procedures. Here is platforms that are really, for better or worse, integrated into our society, and especially our industry, where stuff gets shared a lot, mm-hmm. and information gets passed through. So, I understand the struggle, I guess, but we should understand that the potential for things to progress in a positive way is there.
I think what you're saying is it relies on Instagram. For instance, when we make a long form piece of content, we share it or we announce it on Instagram. Mm-hmm. Even if we're saying, hey, it's on YouTube, hey, it's on our website, we're still using these avenues to sort of announce to the community something has been made and to check it out.
Yeah, and I've seen other arborists do this too with whatever material they happen to be reading. I saw someone, I think just this morning or yesterday, posting an image of the Ed Gilman book on pruning. So there's, people are thinking about it and they're sharing this type of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's just not the things that are coming up in your algorithm or your reels or your short. What'd you say?
And I should say, I don't even argue that those things are less interesting to look at.
Yeah.
I definitely enjoy reading more than I enjoy looking at exciting tree killing videos, but they're just simply not the same. there's no adrenaline in me chilling and reading a book. It's not exciting. So I should say that I get it. Yeah, that's the point. Is I understand it. Even though I don't like it, I get it.
Social media sort of highlights one of the most challenging aspects of what we do on a day-to-day basis. The climbing, the rigging. It's very physically demanding, and I think that that's intriguing to a public audience, regardless of if they're interested in being an arborist or not. Like,
yeah,
I know people that said, I watch tree climbing videos and I'm just some guy. I don't want to do this, but I just think it's cool.
Yeah. It highlights like the very challenging parts of it, or at least the more physically challenging parts of it. You have to navigate how to do these things without crushing what's beneath the tree.
Yeah.
And that's not to say, my attitude towards all this isn't to say that it's easy or that it doesn't need doing. My whole argument on it, or against it rather, is that it's overrepresented. And I think it can give the non-arborist viewer the impression that that's all there is to it. Even though that skill set takes years to hone and is challenging, whatever, they don't understand that it's way bigger than that. If you're going to be good at being an arborist.
It's a fraction of what makes up what arboriculture is as an industry.
Right.
You're just seeing a fraction of what it entails.
Right.
Yeah, to be a good arborist.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who in the industry that's where their skill set starts and ends. And I think some of those people are also victim to not knowing there is so much more to arboriculture than just doing that. I think the way that social media overrepresents that element of things misleads everybody into thinking that's all it does. And in fact, I wonder if that's even had that effect on me, in that, do I see all arborists as being just tree killers? Kinda, like I kind of do. If I'm going just based on what I see online, I could very easily land on that conclusion.
There's been a huge highlight in our culture that we're in now that, trades are kind of going to be the next thing for the next generation coming up. And I've been watching these videos talking about how there's more and more demand for people to work in trades, and that younger people are gravitating towards trades to, not take on the financial burden of a traditional, more, let's say, white collar career. And in all of these videos, people are talking about, HVAC systems, plumbing, being a mechanic,
Carpentry.
No one's talking about arboriculture as being a viable trade to have a fulfilling and successful career in. And I was getting ready to shake my computer screen. Like, why is no one mentioning this? Like, this is something that I find is super rewarding, and why is this?
Why is there a lack of representation?
Yeah.
I wonder if there is, I think there are trade schools, and arboriculture is usually not in those trade schools. And perhaps it should be. It's quite difficult to actually enter into arboriculture with good tutelage and good instructors. I'm sure that there are schools that have arboriculture programs. They're few and far between, and probably far fewer than plumbing or HVAC or something like that, or carpentry. So a lot of the way that a lot of people enter into the field is through applying to a tree company and just getting hired and learning as they go. And that could be quite bad in instilling really bad practices, unsafe and bad for trees.
Yeah, depending on who you're working with, they could be teaching you horrible work practices.
Right, so that the conventional avenue into arboriculture is honestly, it's
showing up.
Yeah, but it's kind of
Yeah.
a crapshoot is what I'm getting at, is that you don't know, as an ignorant person, you don't know if the people who are teaching you things actually know what they're talking about or not, because you're an intro person. You don't know.
Yeah.
And so that could potentially set people up for starting their careers headed in the wrong direction, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But if there were trade schools that existed that were, you know, that had good curriculum, then that would be a better place to start, I would think.
Yeah, I would think so too. There's also this double-edged sword, I think, of the feeling of camaraderie and community that comes with arboriculture in social media. You know, you have sort of some of these more public figures that get a lot of praise, and they interact with people, and they, you know, show them new techniques, new pieces of equipment, and that's good. People are sharing ideas and are encouraging of one another. But there's also the dark side to that, where every arborist is the best arborist that ever existed. You know, I'm the best climber. I'm the, you know, like everyone's seen that. If you're anywhere close in proximity to arboriculture,
or especially in like Facebook arborists.
Yeah, it's a horrible place, man.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
I don't interact. Even sometimes I will find an actual compelling question and I'll check the comments and I just think like, nope, I'm not touching this.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I mean by the double-edged sword, is like, you know, it can really be encouraging and develop a sense of community, but it can also do the opposite and sort of create more of a competitive and
confusing
and also combative, a very combative type of space, which is not what you want on, you know.
Yeah, it's especially hard to correct that kind of dichotomy between the combative Facebook commenting and like the helpful Facebook commenting, because on one hand, at least in my own experience, I don't really want to engage in those conversations as someone who is trying to correct bad behavior. Like, that's not my place. And I don't want to seem like I'm proselytizing or I'm preaching or like anything like that. But on the other hand, doing nothing, it just keeps growing and growing, and it perpetuates this dynamic that is ever present.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. And like, this is all to say, and there's another side of this too, that like poor work can just be a symptom of laziness, or not caring ultimately about the outcome of your work. But it can also be,
and not knowing.
It can also be like simply not knowing any better because of, you know, poor training or lack of knowledge, not by your own ignorance, but just simply just not knowing any better.
Well, yeah, and if your instructors don't know better, like, you don't know if your instructors are good or not.
Yeah, this was the guy that taught me, and I'm just doing what he told me to do.
And like, I have no reason to assume he's a knucklehead.
Yeah.
until you do have a reason to assume that. But it takes someone pointing that out. And this kind of touches back to something we talked about in a different conversation about, I think it needs to be okay that we acknowledge, yes, we're all comrades in this industry, but not all of us are doing good by trees. I think it needs to be, for us to progress forward as an industry, it has to be pretty clear that everything's not just okay.
And I think we have to recognize too, it's not necessarily the fault of that person that's, you know, spreading bad information or not knowing any better. It's ultimately the failure of the industry to like encourage and sort of demand higher expectations for the people that are carrying out the work.
Yeah. And this is the double-edged sword of having no barrier of entry.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's awesome. We all have an opportunity and a shot at it. And on the other hand, we all have an opportunity or a shot at it. And that anyone can cut trees. And in Michigan, at least, You don't need any special licensing to work on trees.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we say that like we're both openly fans of criticizing our industry and sort of the state it's in, but I don't ever want to come off as like bullying people that don't know better. Like kind of like what I said. It's a failure of the industry, and it's more, us having less than competent work, or the fact that there's still lion tailing going on, like outside of our windows, literally, is a symptom of our industry failing everyone that works in it. Mm-hmm. It's not the guys necessarily doing it.
I think they have part of it. They have
sure,
part
they're
of
ultimately making the cut, but
yeah, and also too, like the onus is on us to always be trying to improve. And I think that folks have a tendency to improve on their skills, and while that's important to make safe cuts, there's less emphasis on why you make cuts or why you don't make cuts. I think the skill needs to expand into perspective once you have the practical down. And the place where we have gained perspective in school, in books, in conversations with actual tree wizards, those conversations, those learning moments, just for me, do not happen online. And if that's the only place I'm ever looking, that's where I will be stuck. If no new information ever enters into those spaces, and if I'm not looking outside of those spaces, I have no one else to learn from. And I don't know if my boss is a knucklehead or not. I don't know that.
One thing that we've talked about throughout this whole episode, but perhaps haven't, I guess, talked about it in this way, is that social media is glamorizing or really focused on risk reductive style work, not stress reduction. Mm-hmm. So, that's things like, removal is risk reduction. You're removing the risk of a tree entirely.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of stuff even more recently just on like making proper pruning cuts. You see people that do like, rate my prune, or things like that. So, but it's all, the point is, it's a lot of risk reductive work that's getting highlighted, and not enough stress reduction stuff.
Yeah, and that again, and perhaps we can produce those things, but they're just less showy. Yeah,
and I think it's this lack of highlighting the other areas of arboriculture that is sort of lacking in this social media space,
And that no one's doing it?
Yeah, well, like, no one's showing off their picus, really. No one's showing off tomography or like their resistograph results, or there are some niche people that are doing this, but like showcasing their habitat retention and habitat creation. They're I don't want to say they're niche, but they're a much smaller community than the whole overarching.
Yeah. Well, you said this earlier, that a lot of the removal stuff leaves the arboricultural algorithm and goes into the mainstream algorithms because they're so flashy and so cool.
Yeah.
But the habitat stuff, at least like Reg Harris's work, stays in a pretty narrow lane.
Yeah.
I also think I'll defend the not posting of advanced assessments, in that part of making those assessments is writing long reports, and I don't want to make another post. I don't want to write more to make a post about the assessment I just did.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, these reports can be 20-something pages long at times, and the last thing I want to do is make a couple more for Instagram. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people do want to see that.
one of the final points is to why I think social media can have a negative influence on the industry, sort of as a whole, is that people will get into it for the wrong reasons, meaning they'll get into it because it looks cool online and not really understanding the ramifications of what they're doing. We sort of have a duty as an arborist to be stewards of the environment and not be like influencers or chasing like internet fame and clout. Yeah. Chasing like this whole clout thing. I just, even though I know that's not the case for everyone, but I feel like it lends itself to it being taken that way. And then ultimately, when that clout or, fame is gone, what are you left with? You're left with a career that, or a skill that you feel no real sense of purpose or like attachment to.
Well, if you really look critically at your money-making skills, if you zoom out far enough, your skills are in killing trees. That doesn't sound very savvy, It doesn't sound like a great skill to have. Yeah, it's necessary, but like the only thing I can do, you and I both have had interactions with people who say that directly. I'm just a tree killer. I could not imagine having that feeling about my skill set and being okay with that. I would feel like I'm doing a disservice to the environment if all I'm doing is killing stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem, it seems like the wrong reason to have gotten into working with trees in the first place.
Yeah. And I think, kind of like what we said, it can just perpetuate that. And I think by this type of work looking cool online, it attracts people to want to work in the field. But if they don't gain a passion for what it means to work with trees and work with nature in a more synergistic type of way, then they're just left with killing trees and posting about it. And then when they're 40 and they realize like it's not cool to be an influencer anymore, what do you have to show for it?
Do you actually know how to take care of trees yet? Or has this all just been performance?
Yeah, performance. Yeah, it becomes more of a performance art than like a career that you take seriously or something that you feel actually like passionate about.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. When you see that your job as an arborist is serving the ecosystem or the environment, it makes it harder to justify fucking up and killing nature for likes and for clout.
It's purposeless.
Purposelessness?
It's purposeless.
Purposeless.
It's purposeless.
Yeah. And destructive. For the sake of nothing.
Yeah, and being worried about public perception and how I look and how badass I am. I just fear will ultimately lead to a feeling of burnout or just like this feeling that like, what am I even really doing this? Like I could have done something. And that's just not, that hasn't been my experience as an arborist, but
Well, our experience is quite unique.
Yeah.
A lot of Instagram influence arborists, whatever you want to call them, influencer arborists maybe. Some of them acquire all these big and expensive toys, all to serve the goal of killing and removing trees. And we know firsthand that those people don't have as much work as someone who is taking care of trees. And hence why these things are so performative. When you're only working 2 days a week killing trees, you've got the time to make videos about it. And the cycle continues, right? The cycle begins like, I see all of these arborist influencers have all this expensive stuff. That's what arboriculture must be. I need that to be a good arborist. It's this whole nasty
it gives you a false perspective of what it's actually like to,
Yeah.
work in our industry.
Yeah. And what you described of like clout chasing and just doing the one thing, I would bet absolutely leads to burnout, because you said it's purposeless.
Yeah,
you're
purposeless.
Just killing stuff
for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, like I cannot, as a human, I cannot wrap my head around like being cool with that's my livelihood. I kill stuff.
In prepping for this episode, I didn't really think that this topic was going to necessarily be that profound or something that I feel like, is anyone going to really think this is interesting? But after talking about it with you, I think this is kind of an important thing to consider. Perhaps the generation before us hasn't really thought about it, because I don't know if I've really seen any sort of discussions on this topic in particular as it pertains to arboriculture. But being our age demographic, and like these are the arborists that are sort of coming up and certainly using these social media platforms, I honestly, I really think it is a conversation that should be more talked about, and a topic worth exploring more.
Yeah, I'm with it. So my piece of advice is to get off Instagram and go read something. Or go to school. Go outside. Go to the forest.
Yeah. Go on a hike.
Get off your phone.
Dorks.